Welcome to Nasdaq Trade Talks. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq. The 2020 Market Structure Conference will take place virtually for the first time in the 87 years since STA has held its annual conference. Joining me to discuss is Jim Toes, President and CEO of Security Traders Association. Jim, welcome back to Trade Talks. It's great to see you. And let's talk about the theme for this year's conference and what some of the topics panelists will be addressing.
Sure. Well, listen, first of all, thanks again for having us on this year. Obviously, we look forward to speaking with you on this event every year. But more importantly, Jill, I want to just congratulate you on what you've been able to do in these days of the pandemic. I mean, this obviously the pandemic has caused so many of us to have to adjust on a personal level or on a professional level, and obviously, you really have leaned into this
Thank you.
this time with all the content that you've been putting out, and I just want you to know that it is noticed.
Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the title of this year's event is A New Day, and it's meant to capture, just what I just kind of touched on is, the events of the pandemic have forced so many of us to pivot, business plans that we all had in January when, every January starts out, everyone's full of optimism in January and confidence because we have plans for the year, but obviously 2020 has had a different plan for us than any plan that we have had for 2020. So that's kind of what the conference is about, is really at a high level. We're going to be touching on a lot of different asset classes and a lot of different segments of the industry. And we're kind of asking the speakers to maybe spend just a little bit of time still doing some of a post-mortem on events that maybe occurred in their particular asset class or business sector, but spend more time talking about, listen, of those adjustments and pivots that everybody had to make, which ones are going to be longer term and which ones will, not exist and just kind of go back to normal again. But that's kind of the high level theme of it.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting now that we understand how to operate in a virtual environment, not only just from market resiliency perspective, but just business overall. So, I'm curious to hear what panelists have to say as we look into 2021 and beyond, if it will go back to the way it was like in 2019, or do we understand what hybrid operation looks at this point? It certainly is more efficient and cost effective. And of course, you have to weigh in the human element as well, especially, every member of STA is certainly can relate to the human element, but it seems like hybrid roles could be here to stay.
Yeah, I do think, to your point, I mean, I do think that we're not going to go back to the way it was. I think everyone would wholeheartedly agree on that. But I do think that as we're having these conversations with senior people, the work from home aspect, they are able to cope and deal with it and be very productive with it. But I think longer term, when you start thinking about the things that you read about in the paper, how do you create culture when you have your employees working from home for such an extended period of times? And then most importantly too, which this does come up and it will be touched on, we're still very much of an apprentice industry where, we're not learning the things that we're doing in college here. Most of the learning that people do in our industry is just really kind of coming in and sitting next to somebody and then absorbing things that are going on in the room around them. I think that's going to be, that point's going to be delivered pretty strongly at the conference, and how firms kind of fill that gap of like, how do we recreate that apprentice type of a learning that has been so crucial to our business in the past? How do we recreate that in a virtual environment?
Right. And of course, always looking for the silver lining in these situations. I hope to be back on the ground in 2021. I always look forward to DC in the month of October to cover the conference. But, perhaps it could democratize access as well. Perhaps you can get more global participation if you do have that virtual element. So that could be the silver lining where you see even more participation in conference coverage going forward.
I think that's true. So listen, here's been our experience, right? So last year, we'll just talk some numbers quickly, right? So last year we did have 750 people walk through the doors of the DC event over a 3-day period. And there's always been this fear. We have discussed the idea of, like, in the past, like, should we be live streaming this event? But there's always been that fear around, oh my goodness, no, we're just going to cannibalize the event. We're going to hurt the event. If there's one thing we've learned from this experience, is that is not the case. Our registration as we stand right now is close to 1,600. And when we look at it's relatively the same amount of firms that we have year over year. It's the same amount of firms, but the registration is a double. Most of the people that we're seeing registering for the event are the junior people. So I think a typical scenario for us is that normally in years past, a firm would sponsor, and they would send 2 senior people to DC to attend the event, to network with other senior managers. But there were always other people at the firm that were kind of left to kind of take care of the firm while the boss is in DC networking on it. There is an enormous amount of opportunity. I do think that we are seeing it already. We have around 11 countries have registered for the event. I don't know what that is from last year, but it's got to be up a lot, because we tend to be mostly Canada. We have around 60 people from the UK who have registered. That's up 59 from last year. I think we had one. So yeah, there's definitely the reach here is great. And it's really not, like I said, it's not new firms. It's really reaching deeper into the firms that already support the organization.
See, and to me, I think that is an awesome opportunity because then you get younger, fresher, more diverse perspective coming into the event. So I, for one, am certainly excited to cover it October 7th and 8th this year. Jim, always great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us on Trade Talks.
Thanks for having us.
And thanks for joining me. I'm Jill Malandrino, Global Markets Reporter at Nasdaq.